In the first 10 years of our marriage, I never thought I would be jealous. I never had a reason to be. Sarah was the kind of wife who made you believe in the goodness of humanity, the kind of woman who got up early to prepare breakfast, and whose smile could brighten the darkest day. There was an innocent charm about her, a little shyness, a little introversion, and she always spoke carefully, as if she were guarding some secret she didn't even know herself. We met at university. I was studying literature. She was an engineering student. I never thought a girl like her would be with a guy like me. I run a construction company in the city, and my work is long hours, endless meetings, blueprints scattered all over my desk. It keeps me busy and focused. Sarah is a school teacher, and she loves her job, lives and breathes it. Her days are filled with stories of children learning to read, finding joy in things we adults have long forgotten. I used to love listening to her. Those children, her eyes would sparkle as if they were her own flesh and blood. We live in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of town, where everyone knows everyone else. I thought we were happy, that I knew her, in a way that no one else could understand. I never doubted her, until those moments started to creep in. At parties, she was always shy around people she didn't know. She'd shrink back and whisper in my ear. But lately she seemed different, more distant. She started spending more time on her phone, smiling at texts, never explaining. I often saw her sneaking off to the bathroom, her phone clenched in her hand, blushing like she'd just run a marathon. She claims it's just work, but I can see her lips trembling. Lips trembling, and then late nights. She used to come straight home after school, but lately she makes excuses about staff meetings, extra classes and charity events she never mentioned before. I can feel the distance growing between us, but every time I try to ask, she brushes me off, accusing me of being paranoid and saying I need to trust her more. God, I want to trust her, but there's something I can't put my finger on that's making me lose sleep and eat without appetite. Then there's Rodney, the new guy, a lawyer, moved here a few months ago. Good-looking, effortless, always smiling, always friendly. I noticed Sarah's eyes lingering on him a little longer than usual, and at a neighborhood barbecue she introduced him to me, with a kind of eagerness I hadn't seen in years. I shrugged my shoulders and thought that maybe I was imagining things. After all, she was my wife, and I trusted her, didn't I? But the way she laughed at his jokes, the way she blushed when he complimented her, the way she seemed to glow when he was around, it all made my stomach churn. At first I said nothing, just observed and waited, and it was then that I began to notice small details. Rodney's car parked too close to our house. Sometimes I came home early. Her face would brighten when he was mentioned. At first I thought these were harmless, but the lingering doubts and vague suspicions would not go away. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe there was something I didn't know about, but I would find out. Sarah's changes did not stop. In fact, they seemed to multiply. Small cracks spread across the surface of our fragile marriage. At first it was small things, forgotten conversations, moments when she seemed absent-minded, her mind seemingly somewhere else, far away from mine. She began to spend more time in front of the mirror, fixing her hair, trying on new clothes, applying elaborate makeup. She had never done this before. She had always been comfortable and naturally beautiful, but now it seemed like she was trying to please someone. Her mobile phone has also become her constant companion. She used to leave it lying around, but now it is always in her hand or carefully tucked away in her pocket. I can hear it buzzing late at night, her fingers tapping away in the dark, responding quickly, while I pretend to be asleep. I could feel the gap between us growing wider every day. I remember one night when she came home late, saying she'd been to a school board meeting, but I could see her fumbling for the keys in the door and the faint smell of whiskey on her breath. Sarah hardly ever drinks, and even when she does, it's just a glass of wine, never spirits. I wanted to confront her then and there, but her eyes stopped me. I had never seen those eyes before. Fear and guilt were mingled together, as if she knew I was following her. I gave up, but my suspicions grew. One Saturday I decided to follow her. She told me she was going to the mall to meet friends, but I knew she was lying. She was dressed too formally and attractively for just a shopping trip. I waited until she left, then grabbed my jacket and keys and followed her car from a distance. Instead of going to the mall, she drove to the city center, pulled up outside a small cafe and went in. I watched her from across the street, feeling like a stalker, my heart pounding and my hands white with knuckles as I gripped the steering wheel. A few minutes later, Rodney appeared. I saw the way he smiled when he saw her, the way she beamed when she took his hand. They sat at a table in the corner, her back to the window, his face hidden by a baseball cap. They seemed to be chatting for hours, heads close together, fingers brushing the table. I felt anger building inside me, a searing anger I hadn't felt in years. I wanted to storm in there and turn the table over, demand answers from her, but I didn't. I just sat there, my stomach in turmoil. Every laugh, every touch, I needed proof, real proof, not my gut instinct. I needed her to admit it. When I confronted her, I wanted to see the truth in her eyes. So I waited. When she came home that evening, I could see that she had been drinking. Her cheeks were flushed, and her lips were stained with wine. I asked her how her day had been, pretending not to know, hoping she would slip up, but she was too clever. She told me she had gone shopping and had lunch with a friend. All the lies with a sweet smile broke my heart. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know the truth, so I decided to set a trap. I contacted a private investigator, a man who could help me with the dirty work. This man could. What was my wife really doing? It didn't feel very honorable, but I had no choice. I couldn't stand this lingering doubt. I needed answers. A week later, I received a phone call. The investigator had found something big. He didn't want to say it over the phone, so we arranged to meet at a local pub, somewhere private. I remember sitting there drinking, and my heart pounding, waiting for him to appear. He finally came and sat down. He handed me a thick envelope and said there were photos and text inside. She had been seeing him for a while. Rodney. I felt the blood drain from my face. I tore open the envelope and the truth was revealed to me. Photos of Sarah and Rodney on secret dates, kissing behind doors, her body pressed against his as if it belonged there. I felt sick, my stomach churning, anger and disbelief mingling. I didn't need to read anymore. I closed the envelope, my hands shaking, my mind racing. I thanked the investigator and walked out. My mind was in turmoil, a mixture of anger, confusion, and a burning desire for revenge. The betrayal was real, and sooner or later I would have to face the truth. I didn't sleep that night, lying in the dark staring at the ceiling. The photograph burned a hole in my mind. Sarah slept next to me, breathing softly. Her body was turned away from me. I wondered how many nights she had lain next to me thinking about Rodney. Those images constantly playing in her mind, her lips pressed against his, the way she looked at him, the way I hadn't seen for years. I couldn't pretend anymore. The truth was staring me in the face. I needed to face her. I wanted to hear her say it. I wanted her to confess. I wanted to see if she still had the nerve to lie to me the next morning. I made coffee and sat at the table waiting for her to come down. I watched her as she paced the room, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. She smiled at me, kissed my cheek, and poured herself a cup of coffee. I watched my stomach churn and the words well up in my throat. "Sarah," I said, my voice too calm, "we need to talk." She looked up at me, surprised. "Where's Rodney?" I said, cutting to the chase. Her hand froze in midair. The coffee cup trembled. She slowly lowered the cup. Her eyes searched my eyes, looking for something, looking for some clue, wondering how much I knew. She asked him, her voice steady, too steady. I didn't answer right away. I reached into my jacket, took out the envelope, threw it in the middle of the table. Her eyes glanced at it and returned to me. I could see a flash of fear cross her face. The blood drained from her cheeks. I opened the envelope. She said she hesitated, her fingers trembling as she reached for the envelope. She took out the photos and quickly flicked through them. Her face crumbled with each new photo. I watched as her lips parted slightly, her breathing ragged, her hands shaking so badly they almost fell off. "Tony, I can explain." She stuttered, her voice choking. I hissed, the anger inside me spilling out. "Explain, Sarah. How have you been sneaking around behind my back? Why have you been sneaking around behind my back? Rodney." She winced as if I had slapped her. Her tears welled in her eyes. "It's not like that," she whispered, her voice full of panic. "It wasn't supposed to happen, Tony. I swear I never meant for things to go this far." "Then why?" I slammed my fist down on the table. "Why did you do it? Was I not good enough for you? Were you tired of me? Was it for the thrill of it?" She broke down, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know," she sobbed. "I don't know why I did it. I feel so alone. I feel like you don't pay attention to me anymore, like I'm invisible." Invisible. I bitterly laughed. Is that your excuse? I work my ass off every day just to give you everything you want. I love you, Sarah. I trusted you. I know, she cried. I know. I'm sorry, so sorry. Tony, this was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to happen, just SX. I finished the song for her, my voice cold. It was she who didn't answer, she couldn't answer. Her silence was the best proof. I stood up, the chair scraped against the floor. I couldn't look at her anymore. I felt sick, disgusted, betrayed. You humiliated me, Sarah, I said, my voice shaking with anger. You humiliated me in front of everyone. Now the whole city knows exactly who you are. She tried to reach out and touch my arm, but I pulled away. Tony, please, I didn't mean to hurt you. She begged. We can work through this, fix it, I scoffed. There's nothing to fix. You destroyed us, Sarah. You destroyed us the moment you kissed him at the party. The moment you let him touch you, you abandoned everything we had. She stared at me in shock. Tony, please. I shook my head and felt a cold sense of detachment sweep over me. You are no longer my problem, I said, my voice hollow. You made your choice, and now you must live with the consequences. I turned towards the door, my hands clenched into fists, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. I heard her calling my name behind me, crying, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't turn around. When I walked out the door, the sunlight stung my face and made me dizzy for a moment. I felt a rush of anger, a sense of freedom, something I can't quite describe. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay, couldn't be with her, not after what she'd done. As I walked away, I felt a cold reality engulfing me, that nothing would ever be the same again. I walked for hours, through streets I hardly recognized, with haunting images in my head, Sarah's face, her tears, her pleas, all like distant echoes, unreal, a nightmare from which I tried to wake up, but knew I could not wake up from this nightmare, that this was my life now. Shattered, beyond repair. Eventually I found myself standing outside a bar on the edge of town, the kind of place you never go to unless you want to disappear. I pushed open the door and the smell of stale beer and smoke hit me like a punch in the stomach. It was dark and almost empty. A few old drunks hunched over their drinks, their eyes glazed, lost in their own pain. It seemed like the perfect place for me. I ordered a whiskey, downed it in one go, and ordered another. I wanted to drown out the anger, the pain, and the shame. I wanted to forget it all, if only for a moment. I stared at the amber liquid, watching the light play across it, wondering how I had ended up here. Then, like clockwork, my phone started buzzing in my pocket. It was all her calls and texts. I let it buzz until it stopped. Then it started again, like a relentless reminder that I couldn't escape what had happened. I finally took it out and opened the message. Tony, please come back. We need to talk. I'm sorry, I know I messed up. Please come home. Tony, please. I love you. The words made me want to laugh and scream. Did she know what love was? Was it love when she let him touch her, when she let him kiss her? When she looked at him with those eyes that were mine alone? I threw my phone on the bar, and the screen shattered on the wood. The bartender glanced at it, raised an eyebrow, but didn't say anything. I think he's seen worse. I want to leave it all behind, but I know I can't. I have a life here, a house, responsibilities. I have a son, and as much as I want to escape, I know I can't leave him behind. He's just a child, still innocent in the matter. He doesn't deserve the mess his mother and I have created. I keep drinking, trying to dull the pain in my chest, but with each drink, the anger seems to grow, rising and demanding to be let out. I start to think about Rodney, the way he smiled at me that night at the party, the way he put his hand on the small of Sarah's back as if she were his, as if he had a right to do it. I wonder if he's laughing now, if he thinks he's won. I feel my anger boil in my fists, clenching them tightly. I know I can't just let go. I need to confront him, tell him what I think of him, make him pay for the mistakes he's made. I pull out my phone again, the screen cracked, and I scroll through my contacts until I find his number. When we first met a few months ago, he insisted that we should get a drink sometime to get to know each other better. I saved the number without thinking much of it at the time, but it came in handy now. I pressed the call button, my hand trembling slightly. The phone rang. After 1, 2, 3 rings, he picked up. His voice was calm and confident. "What's up, mate?" I took a deep breath and tried to steady my voice. "We need to talk." I spoke curtly and coldly. There was a moment of silence. I could almost hear him weighing up the situation, trying to gauge my mood. "Sure, mate, what's up?" "I can't talk about it over the phone," I answered, "and I'll meet you at O'Reilly's in an hour." I hesitated. "O'Reilly's is a bit far. Don't you think that's a bit much to ask?" "Rodney," I said firmly, "I'll see you in an hour." My heart was pounding heavily before he responded. I knew it was risky, and I knew the meeting could quickly turn sour, but I didn't care. I needed to face him, look him in the eye, and make him understand what he had done. I finished my drink, smashed the glass on the floor, and stood up. The alcohol made me feel a little dizzy, so I threw some money on the bar and walked out. The night air hit me like a slap in the face. I took a deep breath to try and clear my head, then started walking towards O'Reilly's. I knew one thing for sure: this wasn't over, not by a long shot. It felt like an eternity before I reached O'Reilly's. My heartbeat accompanied every step. My mind raced with thoughts of what I would say to Rodney and how I would handle the situation. I tried to picture his face, his arrogant smile that he always wore. I clenched my fists, feeling the anger simmering just below the surface of my skin, almost unable to contain it. When I finally arrived, the bar was almost empty, with just a few regulars hunched over their drinks in the corner. The bartender nodded at me as I walked in, but I didn't respond. I was too focused, too angry. I walked straight to the back, where it was dimly lit and the air smelled of spilled beer and stale cigarettes. After a while, a few minutes later, the door pushed open and Rodney walked in. He looked around, spotted me, and came over. He had a relaxed smile on his face, didn't look worried, and didn't look like someone who was hiding something, which made me hate him even more. Tony said hello to me and slid into the seat opposite me. "Man, what's wrong with you? You sounded serious on the phone." I stared at him, my eyes like I wanted to bore a hole in him. "Cut the crap, Rodney. You know why you're here." He winked, still playing dumb, but there was a flicker of uncertainty, even fear in his eyes. "I'm not sure, but I know." He said slowly, "Why didn't you tell me?" I reached into my jacket and took out the envelope, the one I'd shown Sarah. I threw it on the table and looked at it. It looked familiar. Rodney hesitated, then reached for the envelope. He took out the photo, and for the first time I saw his face change. Just a hint of surprise quickly replaced by an angry calm. He put the photo down, looked up at me, and whispered, "I suppose there's no point in denying it." I felt a surge of anger and clenched my fists, denying, "You don't even look sorry, Rodney. You don't even look ashamed." He shrugged, his voice taking on a hint of defensiveness. "What do you want me to say, Tony? I didn't plan for any of this to happen. It just did. She came to me. You know she was lonely. She needed someone, and that someone happened to be you. You were ready and willing to step in and ruin my life, weren't you?" Rodney leans back and sighs. "Man, I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't. But things aren't always black and white." She was in pain, and there I was. I don't know what else to say. I slam my fist down on the table, and the glass clinks. "You don't know what else to say. You say you don't know what else to say." After my wife cheated on me, he didn't flinch, just sat there, as calm as ever. "You didn't think I'd be upset about it, that I wasn't racked with guilt, but she needed something that you weren't giving her, Tony. She needed to be seen and needed, and you weren't there." Again I felt rage, searing and primal, and you can't blame this on me. Wrong. I growled, "You think I'm not here? I work my ass off every day, I give everything I've got, and this is how she repays me, this is how you repay me." Rodney looked at me, his face finally losing its arrogant calm, and he said, "I'm sorry, Tony, I'm really sorry. Maybe you should look at yourself too. Maybe if you paid her a little more attention, she wouldn't need me." That was it, that was my tipping point. I felt a white-hot rage erupt inside me. My vision went blurry. I charged across the table and hit him with a fist to the chin, knocking him backwards onto the stall. The regulars at the bar turned to look, but I didn't care. I needed to hurt him, to make him feel the pain I was feeling. Rodney scrambled to his feet, wiping blood from his lips, his eyes wide with shock. Tony calmed down, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender, shouting, "This isn't going to solve anything." "But I don't care about solving anything, I just want him to suffer." I swung again, my fist his ribs. This time he grunted and bent over, but I didn't stop. I kept swinging, kept hitting. Months of doubt, weeks of confusion, and days of knowing the truth had fueled my strength. I could hear the bartender shouting and saw the regulars starting to get up, but I didn't care. I felt someone grab me from behind, and pull me away from Rodney. He was leaning against the wall by now, breathing heavily, blood running down his face. "Let go of me," I shouted, struggling. "Calm down, Tony," the bartender shouted, pulling me back. "You'll kill him." I stopped panting, my chest heaving, my knuckles bruised and bleeding. I looked at Rodney, who was wiping tears from his face with the back of his hand, his eyes full of anger and fear. "This isn't over," I whispered, my voice dangerously calm. "You stay away from my wife. You stay away from my family, or I swear to God I'll finish you." Rodney nodded, his face pale, his hands still raised in surrender. "Okay, Tony," he muttered, his voice strained. "Okay, go home, talk to her, work it out." I turned and walked out of the bar, my heart racing, my hands still shaking from the adrenaline. I had no idea what I was going to do next, but one thing I was sure of was that I would never do anything stupid again. As I re-entered the night, I realized that I still needed to make a decision, and whatever that decision was, it would change everything. After leaving the bar, I drove aimlessly for hours, my knuckles aching, my head full of thoughts, anger still there, but now other emotions had emerged: doubt, confusion, a deep sense of betrayal, stronger than anything I had ever felt before. What had I missed? How did I let this happen? I asked myself these questions over and over again, trying to make sense of everything and find some reason or explanation that would stop me from feeling like a complete idiot. Eventually, I pulled over to a quiet stretch of road, my hands gripping the steering wheel as I tried to keep my breathing steady. I needed to think, to figure out what to do next. I could go home and confront Sarah again, hold her accountable for her actions, but I knew that whatever she said wouldn't be enough to make up for the damage that had already been done. I stare out at the dark, empty street beyond the windscreen and feel a cold, hollow sense of nothingness seep into my bones. I have always prided myself on being in control of everything. But now my life feels like it is spiraling out of control, and I don't know how to stop it. Suddenly, the silence is broken by the ringing of the phone on the passenger seat. I reach for it, half expecting a text from Sarah, but it's not. My son's name flashes on the screen. My heart constricts as I pick up the phone. I answered, my voice trembling. "Hey, buddy," I said, trying to keep my tone steady. Dad's voice was small and uncertain, and I felt a pang of guilt and a tightening in my chest. "Where's Mum? She's been crying, and she won't stop." I swallowed hard, my throat tightening. "I'm going out, kiddo, just need some fresh air." "Are you coming home?" he asked. His voice was a little shaky. "I don't like it when you and Mum fight, it scares me." I close my eyes and feel a wave of shame wash over me. I hadn't even considered how this would affect him. He's just a kid caught in the middle of a war. He didn't ask to be a part of it. "Yes," I say softly. "Yes, I'll be home soon." He seems to relax slightly, and I hear him take a deep breath. "Okay, I love you, Dad. I love you too, buddy," I reply, my voice a little shaky. "I love you too." I hung up the phone and sat there staring at the phone in my hand for a while. I knew I had to go back. I had to face her again, if not for me, then for my son, who deserved better, who deserved parents who could at least pretend to be strong. I started the car and turned around. The street was quiet, the world seemed to be asleep, but inside I felt like I was walking into a war zone. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the lights were still on. I saw her figure through the window. She was sitting on the sofa, shoulders slumped, head in her hands, arms folded across her chest. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, and then got out of the car. My legs were heavy, and I walked slowly and cautiously, step by step, towards the door. I paused for a moment, my hand on the doorknob, my heart pounding in my chest. Then I pushed the door open and walked in. She looked up, and I saw her red, puffy eyes, tears hanging from her face. She seemed to have been crying for hours, her whole body shaking with every sharp breath. I felt a twinge of sympathy, maybe just a sense of exhaustion. "I'm tired of all this, Tony. I'm tired of it," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry, really sorry." I stood there staring at her, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I could see the guilt and shame in her eyes, but it wasn't enough. It didn't change what she'd done. It didn't erase the betrayal. Betrayal. "I know you're sorry," I said, my voice flat and emotionless. "But it doesn't make up for anything, Sarah. It doesn't make everything right," she cried, burying her face in her hands. I know. I just don't know what else to do. I'm so lost, Tony, so lost." I felt a twinge of pity. and a small part of me that still wanted to reach out and hold her, to tell her that everything would be okay. But I couldn't now. Not now. Not after everything we'd been through. We had to sort this out, I said firmly. Not just for us, but for him too. We owed it to him. She nodded, wiped her eyes, and tried to pull herself together. I want to make this right, she whispered. I want to make this right, Tony, please. I'll do anything. I looked at her and felt the weight of her words, the desperation in her voice. I knew we still had a long way to go, and that more pain, more questions, more doubts lay ahead. But in that moment, I also knew that I couldn't walk away. Not yet. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Okay, I said softly. We'll try for him. She nodded again, her eyes full of fragile hope. As we sat there, silence spread between us. I realized that this was just the beginning, that the real struggle had only just begun. In the days that followed, I was perplexed by the awkward silences and forced conversations. Every interaction felt like walking carefully through a minefield, afraid of saying the wrong thing and setting off an explosion that would destroy the fragile things we had so carefully held together. Sarah haunted the house like a ghost, her presence a constant reminder of the betrayal and lies that had destroyed our shared life. I can see the guilt in her eyes. She winces every time I raise my voice. Her hands tremble as she speaks to me. I can feel the shame emanating from her, an invisible mist that hangs between us. We try to make things normal. For our son's sake, we try to keep smiling at dinner, ask him how his day was, pretend that we are still the happy family he sees in his eyes, but he can still sense that something is wrong. I notice that he sometimes steals glances at us, his young eyes full of confusion and fear. I want to reassure him that everything will be fine, but the words get stuck in my throat. I'm not even sure I believe them. Nights are the hardest. We still sleep in the same bed, but there's a gulf between us that seems to grow wider every day. I can feel her presence, hear her soft breathing in the dark, but it feels like she's so far away. I wonder if she's thinking about him, if she's dreaming about Rodney, and even though she's lying next to me, the thought makes me feel sick and makes me want to scream, but I hold back and remain silent. I knew that if I let my anger out, we would not be able to move forward. If I let my anger out, there was not a night. About a week later, I couldn't take it anymore. I rolled over in bed, my heart racing, wondering why Sarah, why him. She didn't answer at first. Even in the dim light, I could see the tears glistening in her eyes. I don't know, she whispered. Tony, I feel like you're not talking to me anymore, like I'm fading out of your life. I bit my lip. I tried to remain calm, but words of rebuttal sprang to mind. I'm working hard, Sarah. I'm trying to build a good life for us, to give you everything you want. I thought you understood. She nodded, her hands clutching the blanket. I do, but I feel like you're always distracted, like even when you're here, you're not really here. And then Rodney, he listens to me. He makes me feel important. I know it's not an excuse, but it's the truth. I turned away and stared at the ceiling. Her words stung, and I had to admit that maybe she was right, that I had become too distant, too focused on work, too distracted to notice the cracks in our marriage. But that didn't make what she had done any less. I said, "We can't go on like this," my voice a little strained. "We can't keep pretending that everything is fine. It's not true." She reached out, and her trembling hand touched my arm. "I want to make this right, Tony," she whispered. "I wanted to make this right. I'll do anything. I'll go to therapy. I'll quit my job. I'll do anything." I sighed, feeling her words weigh me down. "It's not that simple, Sarah. You've broken something, and I don't know if we can put it back together again." I know she said it in a small, frustrated voice, but I want to try. Please let me try. Turning to face her, I search her eyes for any sign of deception, any flicker of doubt, but all I see is pain and regret, and a desperate hope. I know this is a crossroads. I can leave her and start again, or I can stay and try to rebuild and see if there is anything left to salvage. "Okay," I whisper. "We'll try, but it will take time, Sarah, and it will be painful." She nodded, her eyes full of tears. "I know," she whispered. "I'll do whatever it takes." We lay in the dark, silence spreading between us, full of unspoken words. I felt her hand slip into mine, tentative and hesitant. I didn't pull away, just gave it a gentle squeeze. It was a small gesture. Maybe we could really find a solution. But deep down I knew it wouldn't be easy. The road ahead is full of landmines, Every step is full of uncertainty, and every moment tests whether we can really forgive and whether we can really move on. I don't know if we can succeed, but for the sake of my son and the life we have created together, I must try. As I lie in the dark holding her hand, I can't help but wonder if we will ever find each other again, or if we are just delaying the inevitable. As the days go by, each one feels like an uphill battle. We started the therapy sessions as agreed, twice a week, which felt more like an interrogation than anything else. The therapist was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a gentle voice. The way she looked at us made me feel naked and exposed, as if she could see through every lie and excuse. The first few sessions were brutal. I sat there with my arms crossed, my jaw clenching every time Sarah spoke. I didn't want to hear her side of the story, her explanations and justifications. I just wanted to scream and shout and demand that she explain the mess she had made of our lives. But the therapist relentlessly and unflinchingly insisted that we open up and say everything, even if it hurt. Especially when you found me staring at her. "How did you feel, Tony?" she asked one day, her voice soft and full of curiosity. "How do you think I felt?" I blurted out. I felt betrayed and humiliated, as if everything I had built, everything I believed in, was a lie. Sarah winced at my words, her hands twisting together in her lap. The therapist didn't react, just nodded, her gaze firm. "That's understandable," she said. "But what else?" "What else?" I scoffed. "What else?" She leaned forward, her voice soft. "What else? It's all a lie." Sarah winced at my words and intertwined her hands in her lap. The therapist didn't react, just nodded with a firm gaze. "It's understandable," she said, "but is there anything else?" I mocked. "What else?" She leaned forward, her eyes never leaving mine. "Do you feel any guilt? Do you feel like maybe you've contributed to this in some way?" I flared up, furious. I hadn't cheated. I hadn't. "Why should I feel guilty?" Sarah continued, her voice trembling. "Tony, I know this is hard, but we're both to blame. I know I shouldn't have done it, but I felt so alone. I felt you've made me invisible, like you don't care about me anymore." "I care about you," I retorted. "I care about you more than you could ever know, but I have responsibilities, Sarah. I have a job, a family to support." "I thought you understood." She wiped her eyes and nodded. "Yes, I understand, but I need more than that, Tony. I need you, I need us." I felt a wave of exhaustion sweep over me, a deep, bone-deep tiredness. "Now," I ask. My voice was flat and unemotional. "What do you want now?" "I want to fix this," she whispered. "I want to be with you, Tony. I want our family back." The therapist intervened, sensing the tension in the air. "It's a process," she says. "Rebuilding trust takes time. You both need to be willing to work hard, even if it's hard." I don't respond, just stare at the floor, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. Can I do this? Can I really forgive her? Can I let go of the anger and hurt and work to rebuild what I've lost? Days turn into weeks, and slowly and painfully we find a rhythm. We talk about the things that matter more, the things that don't matter. We go for walks, trying to reconnect, to remember why we fell in love in the first place. Sometimes I feel like I catch a glimpse of my old self, and it feels real and true, but it's fleeting. And soon it's replaced by memories of the betrayal I've committed against her, the image of Rodney, and the sight of them entwined. One night I found myself unable to sleep, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing out of control. I got up quietly so as not to wake her, then went downstairs and poured myself a glass of wine. Sitting in the dark, I felt the weight of it all pressing down on me. Then, without hesitation, I picked up my phone and went through the old text messages. The investigator's text messages, photos, and messages were all still there, like an unhealed wound. I found myself reading them over and over again, each word like a knife in my heart. I don't know how long I sat there staring at those texts, feeling the anger, the hurt, and the confusion over and over again. I know I should delete them and try to move on, but I can't, not now, maybe never. I hear a noise behind me and turn to see Sarah standing in the doorway, pale and her eyes filled with fear. "Tony, what are you doing?" I looked at her, still holding the phone in my hand, my chest aching. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to get out of this." She took a step forward, her eyes pleading. "We can't go back to the way things were, Tony. We have to let go. We have to try." "I'm trying," I said, my voice choking. "But it's hard, Sarah. It's so fucking hard." She came closer, closer. Her hand reached out to touch mine. I know, but I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I'll wait. As long as it takes, I'll wait. I looked at her and felt a rush of conflicting emotions. Anger, love, pain, hope. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that we could get through this, but doubts lingered. Shadows refused to disperse. I didn't know if I could do it, I admit. My voice was low, she nodded, tears in her eyes. And then she said, "We'll get through this together, day by day." I didn't respond. I just stared at her, feeling the weight of her words, the weight of everything. As we stood there in the darkness, in the silence, I realized that maybe that was enough for now. We did what she said. We stuck to the treatment every day. Awkward dinners, nights full of tense silences. Every step forward felt like 2 steps back, but sometimes, fleeting moments, I felt something real. Like maybe we could really get through this, that maybe we could survive this disaster. But as the weeks passed, cracks began to appear in our fragile relationship. I noticed how she would inch in when her phone rang, how she would glance at the screen and then quickly put it away. Whenever I asked her where she'd been or who she'd been with, I could feel the tension in the air. She always answered with that desperate sincerity, but I could see something in her eyes that made me doubt. I tried to ignore it, to push it down, to focus on rebuilding, to try to find a way forward, but the doubt lingered. I found myself checking her phone when she wasn't around, browsing through her texts and call history. I felt guilty about it, hated myself for being a voyeur, for betraying the person she trusted. But I couldn't stop. I needed to know. I needed to be sure. One night, I found the text message, just one of many hidden away, from Rodney. "I miss you. Please let's talk. I can't stop thinking about you, and I feel a cold, hard lump in my chest." I stared at the screen, my heart racing, my hands shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. I scrolled up trying to find more, but that was it, just one message, no reply. But it was enough to make me doubt everything again. That night, I waited until my son fell asleep, and then went into his bedroom. My hands were clenched at my sides, and my voice was almost a growl. "Sarah," I said, holding up her phone, "what the hell is going on?" She looked at me with her eyes wide. A flash of panic crossed her face. "Tony, I don't know," she stuttered. "I swear I haven't spoken to him." I felt a bitter laugh escape my lips. "You expect me to believe that, after everything that's happened, you expect me to believe you?" She took a step towards me, her hands outstretched in supplication. "I deleted his number, Tony. I blocked him. I swear I don't know how he got through." I didn't reply. I promise. I shook my head. My anger boiled inside me, hot and fierce. "You didn't reply," I spat. "But you kept it. Why, Sarah? Why didn't you delete it?" Tears welled up in her eyes, her face contorted with guilt and fear. "I don't know," she whispered. "I didn't mean to keep it." "I'm sorry," I shouted, my voice breaking. "You're sorry? Is that all you've got?" She dropped to her knees, sobbing, her body shaking. "I love you, Tony," she cried. "I love you. I tried so hard. Please believe me." I stood there, my heart pounding, my mind racing. I wanted to believe her, to think that this was just a mistake, a fluke, insignificant, but the doubt was ever present, consuming trust. And I didn't know if I could go on. I whispered, my voice hollow. "I don't know if I can keep trying." She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears, her eyes desperate. "Please, Tony," she whispered. "Please don't give up on us. Not yet." I felt the weight of her words, the crushing pressure of the decision I had to make. I saw the pain in her eyes, the fear of losing everything, but I didn't know if I had anything left to give. I didn't know if I could keep pretending that everything would be okay. I needed time. Finally, I turned and left. I said I needed time to think. I walked out of the room, out of the house, into under the cool night sky. I felt like I was suffocating, like I was drowning. I felt the weight of it all, and I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do. But I was sure of one thing: I couldn't live like this anymore. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay when it was so obviously not okay. As I stood there looking up at the stars, I felt a cold, firm determination rise up in my chest. Maybe it was time to stop trying to save what was already lost. Maybe it was time to let go. I wander the city like a ghost, not knowing what I'm looking for, hoping to find something. I just know that I need to go, that I need to clear my head and figure out what to do next. I stay in cheap hotels, drink in quiet bars, trying to forget the pain, But it lingers, growing stronger, tormenting me. I find myself back in O'Reilly's, the same bar where I confronted Rodney. I'm sitting in the same corner, drinking, my thoughts heavy and dark. I replay it over and over again, the betrayals, the lies, the desperate attempts to fix what was already broken. I'm tired, so tired. I know I have to make a decision, face the truth of my life. Just as I'm about to finish my drink and leave, my phone buzzes in my pocket. I pulled out my phone, expecting another message from Sarah, another plea for me to come home and try again, but instead of her, it was a number I didn't recognize. I opened the message and my heart pounded. "Tony, it's Rodney. I need to tell you something about Sarah. Please come to her house and meet me. It's urgent." I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Why was Rodney at our house? What did he know? I felt a wave of anger and suspicion, but also a flash of fear, an instinctive fear that tangled in the depths of my heart. I dropped the money on the table, grabbed my coat and rushed out the door. I drove faster than usual, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what to expect, but Rodney's urgent message kept ringing in my head. I drove to his house and immediately saw his car parked in front of the house, the lights on inside, the front door ajar. I got out of the car, breathing heavily as I approached, hearing raised voices and the sound of something breaking. I clenched my fists. I pushed open the door, walked in, and then stopped. Rodney was in the middle of the living room, pale, his eyes full of fear. Sarah was standing opposite him, red in the face, a bottle of wine broken on the floor at her feet. She looked different, almost crazed, her eyes wild and her hands shaking. Tony screamed when he saw me, his voice shrill with panic. "Thank God you're here. Get him out. Get him out of our house." Rodney raised his hands, trying to calm her. "Sarah, please listen to me. I didn't come here to argue. I came here to help. I wanted to warn you." She let out a shrill laugh that sent shivers down my spine. "You think you can waltz in here and pretend to care about me?" After everything I've been through, I took a step forward, my fear turning to anger. "What the hell is going on? Rodney, why are you here?" He turned to me, his face full of exhaustion. "Tony, I'm here because I'm worried about her. She called me and said she couldn't take it anymore. I thought she might do something stupid." I looked at Sarah and saw the despair in her eyes. Her hands were shaking. "Sarah," I whispered, trying to reassure her, "what the hell is going on? Why did you call him?" Her gaze flickered between us, her breathing was ragged. "I don't know," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I don't know what to do anymore, Tony." I felt myself go crazy. I moved closer to her, trying to reach out to touch her, but she stepped back, her face full of anger. "No," she shouted. "You can't touch me. You can't. Get to fix this. I made a mistake, but you both made it worse, Sarah." I pleaded, feeling panic rising in my chest. "Let's talk. Let's just sit down and talk." But she wasn't listening. She reached behind her, her hand fumbling for something on the counter. I didn't see what it was until it was too late. A knife gleaming in the harsh light of the kitchen. "Sarah," I shouted, my heart freezing in my chest. "Put it down, please put it down." She waved, waving it. Between us, her eyes wild and crazy. I couldn't think, I couldn't breathe. She cried, "You don't understand, you don't know what it's like." Rodney tried to step forward, raising his hands. "Sarah, please, you don't want to hurt anyone." But she turned on him, her face full of fury. "You think you're noble, don't you? You think you're a hero." She lunged forward, and for a moment everything seemed to slow down. I saw Rodney's eyes widen in shock, instinctively raising his hands to protect himself. Then, before I could stop her, she tripped and her foot caught on broken glass. As she fell, the knife stabbed itself into her. She screamed, her piercing sound echoing through the room. She fell to the ground, her shirt stained red with blood. I rushed to her side immediately, pressing my hands against the wound. My heart was beating fast. "Sarah, Sarah, don't leave me. Oh God, don't leave me." Rodney picked up the phone to call for help, his face pale, his hands shaking. His voice was strained with panic. Sarah's eyes opened, and she looked at me. She gasped for breath. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry." I held her as my hands became covered in her blood. My heart broke. No, don't leave me, not now," I begged. "We can fix this." But her eyes began to close and her breathing slowed. I felt the world tilting, and everything around me became blurry. My mind refused to accept what was happening. The ambulance arrived a few minutes later, but it felt like an eternity. They rushed in and pushed me away. Their faces were serious and focused. I watched them work, felt Rodney's hand on my shoulder, and heard his voice say something I couldn't hear or understand. Then they finally stopped. The paramedic looked up and shook his head. His expression was one of quiet sympathy. He said he was sorry. "She's gone." I felt the words like a punch in the stomach, knocking the air out of my lungs. I fell against the wall and slid to the floor, my hands still covered in her blood. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I just sat there, numb, broken, everything around me crumbling. Rodney stayed in the corner waiting, looking as shocked as I felt. He didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. We were both at the center of this tragedy. We both drove Sarah to her end, and now she was gone. In the end, there are no answers, no endings, just the cold, hard truth that some things, once broken, can never be fixed. As I sat there staring at the empty space where Sarah's body had been, I felt the weight of my choices crushing me. I had longed for freedom, for a fresh start, but now I felt only loss, and I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The end.